আমাৰ মাজত উপস্থিত থকা সমল ব্যক্তি আশা কুঠাৰী বাইদেউৰ বিষয়ে মই দুআষাৰমান ক'ব বিচাৰিছোঁ। আশা কুঠাৰী বাইদেউ গুৱাহাটী বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ ইংৰাজী বিভাগৰ প্ৰবক্তা আৰু প্ৰাক্তন বিভাগীয় মুৰব্বী। তেওঁ নাটক, থিয়েটাৰ আৰু চলচ্চিত্ৰ অধ্যয়নৰ লগত বিশেষভাৱে জড়িত। তেওঁ গুৱাহাটী বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ পৰিৱেশ কলা আৰু সংস্কৃতি কেন্দ্ৰৰ সঞ্চালক। তেখেতে গুৱাহাটী বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ ইংৰাজী বিভাগৰ পৰা স্বৰ্ণ পদকসহ স্নাতকোত্তৰ ডিগ্ৰী লাভ কৰাৰ লগতে ৰাষ্ট্ৰীয় যোগ্যতা পৰীক্ষাত উত্তীৰ্ণ হৈ কনিষ্ঠ গৱেষণা বৃত্তি লাভ কৰে। ইয়াৰ পাছত তেওঁ আমেৰিকান নাটকৰ পৰিসৰত তেওঁ গুৱাহাটী বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ৰ পৰা ডক্টৰেট ডিগ্ৰী 2003 বৰ্ষত লাভ কৰে। তেওঁৰ প্ৰকাশিত গ্ৰন্থসমূহৰ ভিতৰত মহেশ দত্তানী এণ্ড ইন্ট্ৰডাকশ্যন, আইডিয়াজ অফ দ্য ষ্টেটছ, চিলেকশ্যনছ ফ্ৰম দ্য ড্ৰামা থিয়ৰী বিশেষভাৱে উল্লেখযোগ্য। তেওঁৰ গৱেষণাধৰ্মী ৰচনা যথেষ্ট আছে আৰু সেইসমূহ বিভিন্ন ৰাষ্ট্ৰীয় আৰু আন্তঃৰাষ্ট্ৰীয় পৰ্যায়ৰ বিভিন্ন গৱেষণা পত্ৰ, আলোচনী আৰু গ্ৰন্থত প্ৰকাশ পাইছে। ইয়াৰ উপৰিও তেওঁ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ গৱেষণাধৰ্মী প্ৰকল্পৰ লগত বিশেষভাৱে জড়িত। UGCৰ অধীনত তেওঁ বিভিন্ন প্ৰকল্পৰ নেতৃত্বত আছে। ইয়াৰ উপৰিও তেওঁ UGC MHRD প্ৰকল্প আৰু ফুলব্ৰাইট নেহেৰু প্ৰকল্পৰ লগত বিশেষভাৱে তেওঁ জড়িত হৈ আছে। তেওঁ বৰ্তমান যশস্বী নাট্যকাৰ অৰুণ শৰ্মাৰ একত্ৰিত ৰচনা কৰ্মৰ অনুবাদৰ এক বিশেষ প্ৰকল্পৰ নেতৃত্বত কাম কৰি আছে। ইয়াৰ উপৰিও তেওঁ কলম্বিয়া ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি, ছান ডিয়েগো ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি, ৱেষ্ট ভাৰ্জিনিয়া ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত কেইবাবাৰো গৱেষণাধৰ্মী বক্তৃতা প্ৰদান কৰিছে। তেওঁ বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আন্তঃৰাষ্ট্ৰীয় শিক্ষানুষ্ঠানৰ লগতে বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ আন্তঃৰাষ্ট্ৰীয় পৰ্যায়ত বক্তৃতা প্ৰদান কৰিছে আৰু তেওঁ বহুকেইটা খ্যাতনামা অনুষ্ঠানৰ উপদেষ্টা আৰু সক্ৰিয় সদস্য। তেওঁ ভাৰতীয় থিয়েটাৰৰ ইতিহাসৰ বিশেষ প্ৰসংগত বৰ্তমান কাম কৰি আছে। আশা ৰাখিছোঁ বাইদেউৰ পৰা আমাৰ শিক্ষাৰ্থীসকল বিশেষভাৱে উপকৃত হ'ব। এতিয়া বাইদেউক তেওঁৰ আজিৰ অনুষ্ঠানৰ 20 বক্তব্য ৰাখিবলৈ অনুৰোধ জনালোঁ।
ডিপাৰ্টমেণ্টৰ seminar or symposium, but I'm choosing to talk in English because সেইটো ভাষাৰে মই অকণমান ভালকৈ নিজকে I can express myself better. So মাজে মাজে অসমীয়া কম, মাজে মাজে ইংৰাজী কম. I hope that it works for everybody. All right. So because it is a theatre conference or a symposium, I think I'll do an interesting thing. I will start off with a speech by Shylock. So we'll just give me a minute. যেহেতু মই ইংৰাজী বিভাগৰ শিক্ষক, মই constantly also a student of theatre, and probably my entire journey into theatre studies began with Shakespeare as a student sometime 1988 when we started doing a play instead of just reading it. আমি নাটক কৰিব ধৰিলোঁ. So from Shylock, I think everyone's familiar with the character of Shylock. I'm asking the students from The Merchant of Venice. Yeah. He's a Jew and he is always in the margins. Hodai manue তেওঁৰ ওপৰত থু পেলায়. And he wants his revenge. And this is a speech. I'm going to actually begin with this. More bhul hole, please. Forgive me. We have eminent theatre people here, so I'll do this. When asked why a pound of flesh from Antonio's chest, he says, to bait fish withal. If it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. He hath disgraced me and hindered me. 500,000 laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what is his reason? I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? Fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer as a Christian is? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we shall resemble you in that. If a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why revenge? The villainy you teach me, I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction. And that is the venom that is carried in the soul of a character like Shylock from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. Now, when we read this like a book or a novel in class, I don't think the same passions really come through. And that is why, because we are all pedagogues, we are all thinking in terms of teaching and learning drama. So one of the ways in which one always does theatre studies or drama in the classroom is by having students try to read it, to get a certain sense of completion of an incomplete text, because that is what a dramatic text always is. It's a text that has holes in it. It's always an incomplete text. And it is only with the performance text that one can fill up those gaps. That, it's in some ways, we are all familiar with the jigsaw puzzle. And, when you can fit those things in, suddenly you have a perfect communication that becomes possible. And very interestingly again, all theatre students, practitioners will know this, that no two performances are ever alike. Every performance is unique and individual and different from the one that has gone before or will come after. And that being the hallmark of, it's like we can rewind and fast forward a movie. As Pranjala said, cinema is a very technical art, you can do that. But when you are looking at a play like Waiting for Godot, or any other thing, where maybe somebody is eating a carrot, you can never eat the same carrot twice. And therefore, you can also never have the same performance twice. So that being one of the unique features of theatre, because I do want to stick to a certain kind of structure to what I'm going to say today, let me also bring in some context and some perspective from where I speak. There are probably many, many more people suited to delivering an address of this nature at a symposium on Ohomia Natok. And so this is a sort of disclaimer that in no case do I claim that my opinions might override the views of established thinkers in the field. And I think all experiences are personal. The theatre understands this. Sometime in 1990, when I was in my final year of my BA, I had an unexpected visitor. Shri Hotta Prasad Borua, already in his 70s, had come with a group of theatre makers to ask me to do an act in an English adaptation called Crossfires. Now that was the first time এইটো এটা অদ্ভুত কথা যদিও মোৰ জন্ম অসমত জন্ম গুৱাহাটীত মোৰ গোটেই একাডেমিক লাইফ my entire life has been spent in Assam. মই অসমীয়া শিকিব ধৰিলোঁ only when I was in college. And this is the problem with education in India currently. আমি bilingualism ঠিক দৰে নাহে যদিও অসমীয়া পঢ়িছিলোঁ, it was compulsory, আমাৰ 3 language formula আছিলে, তথাপিও অসমীয়া নাটক তেনেকৈ মই পোৱা নাছিলোঁ। কিন্তু এইবাৰ in 1990 is the first time I had access to Sathya Prasad Borua's Crossfire, but in English. মই এইটো নাটক কৰিব নোৱাৰিলোঁ কাৰণ আমি BA ফাইনেল আছিলোঁ, এইটো কাৰণে পৰীক্ষা আছিলে, নাটকত সময় দিব নোৱাৰিলোঁ। কিন্তু it was such an, I actually had no idea what an honor it was that a person like Sathya Prasad Borua had come to my house to ask me to act. মই তেখেতক সেই সময় চিনিয়ে নাপাওঁ। পিছত যেতিয়া গম পাইছোঁ, I was like, এইটো কি হ'ল? It wasn't, অলপ দিন পাছতে আমি খালি জ্যোতিপ্ৰসাদৰ এটা দুটা নাটক আমি পাওঁ, কাৰণ সেইটো কলেজত কৰা হয়, কলেজ উইক আৰু তেনেকুৱাত কৰা হয় কেইটামান। এতিয়া মই 2014 জাপ মাৰিম, cut to 2014, and another unexpected and eminent visitor happened to come to my place, Shri Arun Sarma. Again in his later years, he dropped in to give me a copy of the English translation of his plays entitled Robes of Destiny. By this time, of course, I had read quite a few of his plays and had seen many more in performance. বহুত কেইটা পঢ়িছিলোঁ, বহুত কেইটা নাটক দেখিছিলোঁ. Now, that he would personally make this visit was a humbling experience, and one for which I am really grateful. By this time, I was already theoretically and academically examining various dramatic texts, both as literature and as performance texts. And because my parent discipline is English literature, my reading was, and probably still is, heavily biased on world drama and mostly in English translation. Now, I've also had a good fortune of viewership, and that, to my mind, is one thing that has enriched whatever I study. And I probably wouldn't have any perspective on any dramatic literature if I didn't have that kind of a good fortune of viewership. Especially in the last, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the plays that I have seen across from 2015 to now. And that will give you a certain kind of an idea of how theatre is working itself out in different parts of the world. Etu kori moi ako ghuri ahim ghorole. Arun Sarma Deor ketaman natokor kotha kom. So 5 মাহ মই থাকিলোঁ নিউ ইয়ৰ্কত, আৰু এই 5 মাহত মই 55টা নাটক চালোঁ। Okay, so that ranged across Broadway musicals, classics in adaptation, devised pieces, completely new writing, works in progress, improvisations, physical theatre, puppet theatre, bunraku, and at that time something that was very new, immersive theatre. So all of these are very, very interesting in the sense that these, আমি অসমত বহি আছোঁ, কেইটামান মানুহ আমি কৰি আছোঁ, ৰবিজিতা I know does a lot of new things, very edgy, নতুন experiments with theatre. That is the kind of thing that I'm actually talking about here. Some of the notable ones, and because we are talking also about text and performance, aru ami sahitya aru theatre, sob theatre sahitya nohoy hoy na, etu bostu ami mon koru ne, karon ami Assamia etia Assamia bibhagor sahitya he poru, amar focus to sahityor uporote, kintu sob performance is not sahitya. So where is this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch upon specific texts that are literature and is good theatre as well. So in terms of performance, the performance texts of what I have come across. The first thing that actually comes to mind is Ivan van Hove's A View Under the Bridge. It is a play written by Arthur Miller. Experimental production. A production that I wish I had photographs. I thought about it much later. Seeing is always better than just listening. So this is a production where the audience was also expected to sit on the stage. Stageor uporot adha, bahiroto ase, kintu jodi eitu natokor the space ase, side duta deck ase, jot audience bohibo. Moi eitu seat to bisariselu napalu. Lastot bhabilu jeta bhale hol napalu because the last scene of the play, everybody was drenched in blood or red color, because that is what the semiotic of the play centered around, the idea of blood. You know, I was just thinking as Pranjalda talked about Sinha Jatra, you know, because we're talking about science in theatre making. And the signs are there when you're reading the text, it manifests itself in a different way. But when you are seeing a play, also, like I said, blood, the blood becomes the core metaphor, the core sign of what the entire production was talking about. It was about blood. So that was one of the most impressive productions I had seen while I was sometime in 2015. I saw 2 productions of Midsummer Night's Dream. And this was an industrial production. Everybody was wearing Rasta je kam road construction or kam kore, they wear neon jackets, or neon yellow and orange jackets pindhi. Roles constantly interchange kori and etu natok to ehate monchastho korise aru gutte stage khonu ekebare full of pipes, you know, industrial background. So there was no set, no nothing, but you just had that. That was Midsummer Night's Dream, which is supposed to be in a forest. Yeah? If you are familiar with the story of Midsummer Night's Dream, the entire action takes place inside a forest. This was an urban jungle. So the point I'm here making is that the text will never be static. The forest will turn into an urban jungle. And that is how it was done. Henry IV, Salueta production, in St. Anne's Warehouse, going to Brooklyn, a theatre too. That was, the set was again a prison. And it was an all-woman production. Now, it is actually an all-male play. Tate maiki manu tanwa nae. Kintu this was an all-woman production, and they entered through the audience. Everybody was in chains, shackles. Chenere bandha ahi bondi eketa prisoners. So they were all paraded into the performing space. Tar pisot natok to monchastho kore. It involves the spectator in a very different kind of experience than what one would have expected if we are thinking about a traditional costume drama of Shakespeare, which I saw this year again in London. I'm coming to that in a minute. The third play that I will talk about is Émile Zola, the realist. His Therese Rohan, which was, I don't think we will ever be able to match that kind of technical theatre in terms of staging. This is Broadway proper. Gute eta lake ahi jay. Eta scene ase jot the lover of Therese will kill the husband. Okay, and they will be on a boat. Our boat or pra tak theli mur to tolot di pelai manu to murder kora hoy. Our gutte scene to actually dekhwa hoise with the lake on the stage. Now imagine how that can work. A lake on the stage, deep enough for the person to sink into. Okay, so again, this is a lot of money and so on and so forth. It's a stage machinery that is, of course, a capitalistic kind of space that we are looking at. Realism and Emile Zola. That is what we talked about. I also went to a theater which only performed Strindberg's plays. August Strindberg, the Swedish dramatist. So I saw Miss Julie there. It was a very, very bad production. So bhale nohoy. There were some that were pretty bad. We were offered biscuits. Everybody is eating biscuits and watching plays. I don't know, people do all kinds of things. And that, I suppose, is the fun of theatre. But the one most edgy theatre space in New York, and therefore perhaps also in America, is a place called La Mama, which is attached somewhat to New York University. New York University is also the first department of performance studies that was developed by Richard Schechner. And Richard Schechner actually came took me to one of these performances at La Mama. Again, the one thing that struck me was that when you are acting, there has to be no inhibitions. Absolutely none. That is so very essential. And this play that, 2 or 3 plays that I saw actually brought that into view. For spaces, now space is something that I'm finding it very, very difficult to negotiate with in Assam. Amar space ei nai. It is, everyone knows this. Amar ekebare thai nai, natok kot korim. Gauhati University, we have one big auditorium, BKB. We have some 2 or 3 other small ones. No auditorium, no space is correct for a proper theatrical production. And look at this.
Theatre architecture is not there.
No.
It was a beautiful auditorium, not that one previous one we shoot. Yes, some crore rupees invested.
Always.
But not meant for theatre.
No. Acoustics একো নাই একেবাৰে একো নাই তাত কৰিবই নোৱাৰি নাটক সো হেয়া আমি যেনেকৈ তেনেকৈ কৰোঁ আৰু যেতিয়া কৰোঁ এনেকুৱা ঠাই আছে আমাৰ এটা এণ্ড অফক'ৰ্ছ ইট ইজ ষ্ট্ৰেইট প্ৰচেনিয়াম আছে আমাৰ এটা সৰুকৈ এম্ফি থিয়েটাৰ বনাইছে সেইটোত কেইটামান কাম কৰা হয় কিন্তু যদি আপুনি প্ৰচেনিয়াম ষ্টাইল প্ৰডাকশ্যন কৰিব বিচাৰে একেবাৰে নাই দ্যাটছ জাষ্ট গুৱাহাটী ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি গুৱাহাটীতে একো নাই ইউ হেভ ITA মাছখোৱা এটা আছে আৰু শংকৰদেৱ কলাক্ষেত্ৰত আছে ওৱান ইজ এগেইন টু বিগ ফৰ ডুইং প্ৰপাৰ থিয়েটাৰ এণ্ড চ' মষ্ট অফ দ্য প্ৰডাকশ্যনছ আৰ হেপেনিং অনলি ইন মাধৱদেৱ সেয়া সেইটো ঠিকে আছে অল দ্য একোষ্টিক্স বাট জাষ্ট ওৱান আমি যদি থিয়েটাৰ ফেষ্টিভেল এটা ডাঙৰকৈ পাতিব খোজোঁ য'ত 5টা simultaneous production চলি আছে আমি কেনেকৈ কৰিম এটোতো আমাৰ নাই একেবাৰে no infrastructure at all and this is what I found আমি say for example এটা সৰু এটা ঠাই Morgantown in this is somewhere near Pittsburgh West Virginia তাতে মোক মাতিছিলে এনেকৈ কথা পাতিবলৈ এটা workshop এটা কৰিছিলোঁ ইণ্ডিয়ান থিয়েটাৰৰ বিষয়ত সিহঁতি of course একোৱে নাজানে ইণ্ডিয়ান থিয়েটাৰৰ বিষয়ত মই সদায় সিহঁতক কওঁ যে আমি আপোনালোকৰ কথা গোটেই জানো আপোনালোকে আমাৰ কথা একেবাৰে নাজানে so তাতে সৰু ইউনিভাৰ্চিটি ডাঙৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিও নহয় at least 4টা good theatre halls where they could rehearse, they could perform. There's, if you want a big gala event, extravaganza, musical korbo lage, tate ragtime saisulu. They had a traveling group coming in and they performed that. So that kind of infrastructure means a lot of investment. If it means that somebody is invested in the theatre. Amar etu bostu etialoke ekebare nai. Government or tat goleu paisa nai. University authorities or khujile to ekো নাই so আমি ultimately গৈ আমাৰ এটা সাধন আছে আমি বাদল সৰকাৰৰ নিচিনাকৈ থাৰ্ড থিয়েটাৰ ষ্ট্ৰেটেজিজ এডপ্ট কৰি থিয়েটাৰ কৰিব পাৰোঁ কিন্তু তাতকৈ বেছি হ'লে এইটো বস্তুটো নাই লেট মি কাম বেক মই ষ্ট্ৰিনবাৰ্গৰ এইখন নাটক চাই পেলাই আই একচুৱেলি ৱেণ্ট টু ষ্টকহোম চ' ছুইডিছ আৰ্কিপেলাগো আছে তাতে ষ্ট্ৰিনবাৰ্গৰ ঘৰ আছে those of you who are familiar with the plays of August Strindberg will remember that it is very very bleak and gloomy most gloomy natok bhal na lage oshanti lage and so that's what it's meant to evoke but you know if you visit his home it's in the Swedish archipelago it was raining the day I went there aru ekhini samoyat moi tate pura khuskari jabo lage field to cross kori pelai khuru eta hat টাইপৰ ঘৰ আছে সিহঁতি প্ৰিজাৰ্ভ কৰি থৈ দিছে যেনেকৈ আছিলে তেনেকৈ কিন্তু যিটো তাৰ পৰিৱেশটো একেবাৰে গ্লুমি চ' উই ন' ৱেৰ অগষ্ট ষ্ট্ৰিনবাৰ্গ ৱাজ অলছ' ৰাইটিং ফ্ৰম বাট একেটা ঠাইতে মই আকৌ এটা একেবাৰে ক্লাছিকেল প্ৰডাকশ্যন চালোঁ পিগমেলিয়নৰ ইন ফ্ৰেঞ্চ আৰু তাহাঁতি এইটো ছাৰ টাইটেল দি দিয়ে আজিকালি আমাৰ বেংগলোৰ মুম্বাই সব জায়গাত এইটো পদ্ধতি আৰম্ভ হৈছে সাবটাইটেলছটো দি দিয়া হয় তেতিয়া আমি কৰ্ণাটক কান্নড়া ভাষা বা মালয়ালম ভাষাৰ নাটকটো ধুনীয়াকৈ বুজি পাম ভাষাৰ কথাটো আকৌ বেলেগ আছে সেইটো যদি সময় হয় কম তাৰপিছত আমাৰ 2017 and 18 মই এটা স্পেচিয়েল ইয়াৰ বুলি ভাবোঁ মোৰ কাৰণে বিকজ মই মেকবেথৰ 7টা প্ৰডাকশ্যন চাইছোঁ in these 2 years and one was a device performance by Rajat Kapoor tekhete clowns use kore there was Hukracharya Rabha's Macbeth which was using tribal folklore and using the story of Macbeth there was a very bad local production they use some college students joldi ke koriboi lagibo boli kori dise aru hobo aru soli koise then of course I saw a school production which was fairly good schoolot lora soli bilak birat bhalke korisile kintu the one that was absolutely unforgettable for any one of us who have seen that production I don't know Pranjal Hot of course saise is Ratan Thiam's Macbeth and note this Rabha Macbeth aru Thiamor Macbeth dutare bhasha najano Manipuri puri najano Rabha bhasha to najano Macbethor kahini to pise jano and that was where I was when I'm watching the plays and everything is crystal clear karon kisuman bhashar jitu hur ase jitu the depth and weight of the language that itself is able to convey meaning you know I'm sure there were people who didn't know the story of Macbeth but I'm sure they were equally impressed by the production because that is like I said another big story about language and theatre because performance itself after all is a language the mise-en-scene that you create is a language in itself and then Shanghai and this I was telling Subrot yesterday Onkianator kotha koi asile muk Subrote hudise Onkianat Brechtor kiba some kind of borrowing do you think is there from the east or from you know is there any influence of this now I know for certain and those of us who have studied Brecht know for certain that Brecht actually borrowed a lot from China from Chinese theatre from the Peking opera and so on there are distancing effect jitu hoy it where from Dange effect jak koy etu bostu tar pra bahut bostu borrow kori pelai use korisile moi jetia Shanghai first time Peking opera I went to see it tateo you know they have subtitles gotike buji pau মই চকু মুজিছোঁ মইতো অংকিয়ানাত শুনা পাই আছোঁ it was the bhavna and the sounds of the bhavna are exactly like those that you find in Peking opera Now, I was absolutely confounded because this is strange, but it's true. My second time, akko Beijing at goi pelai moi bhabilo akko sam, akko etu khuna pau neki bhavna in amar Assamia sound kita ami moi pai asu. Aru akko eketa kotha. Our second play also had...
Anchored to Black Talk Nazanisile, Anchored to picking or Hey Opera,
No. The sounds are same. Cymbals use ke tal to use kore.
That is universal.
It's asorit kotha. Ekebare khuna pae. Moi koiso, moi soku bujiso. To eya. Ekebare onkiana jen hoye ase. Bhasha completely beleg. Into the way they are jumping also. The gute ga to janake lorai. Apnar olop overt movement jito bhavna use kora hoy. Exactly. Yeah. Same kind of thing. So, so these are some very interesting facts that I have stumbled upon as I keep watching theatre all over the place. Tapsar 2 bosor no theatre, pandemic. Theatre sab bon. Theatre bon hoa nai. Digital theatre aramb hol. Ar hetu ami bhabim keteba bhabu keteba hetu I'm always in two minds. Can digital theatre be theatre? If it is live, can it be still theatre? So there'll be always arguments about this. Moi hoda etu moi tothapi duita na tinta natok moi salu jitu impressed me. One was Vivek Madan's Every Brilliant Thing. Vivek was performing in, I think, in Bangalore. Ami sob beleg jaga Zoom callot etu natok to korile. And we were all, it was a little bit immersive karon amak kiba kibi message email korisile je etu number to tumi diba jeta mata hobo ami number to diu completely interactive odbhut rokomor natok nisna natok nohoy kintu it was a performance of some sort. And
it's a different kind.
Completely.
But not living theatre.
No, how can that be? Any interface actually is not theatre. I mean, hetu kobo paru. Jetia interface eta ahi jay, apunar ga more the vibrations from my skin are not visible or audible to your skin. It is not theatre, perhaps. Some very interesting experiments were done. That was the year when I actually was one of the jury members of Thespo. Jitu Kwasar Badam siye kore. Thespo is a theatre. Please listen. If anyone is interested, please put in your entries for next year's Thespo. This is for theatre for young people. Here talk shortlist kora hoy. Shortlist kori pelai. The best 5 or 6 are invited to perform at Prithvi Theatre. So 5 or 6 this time were not invited to Prithvi Theatre. They were performing from their own hometown. And it was live streamed. But all the judges were also in 5 different cities and live play hoye ase. Aru very interestingly timing eta hoise. One of the plays, this is so interesting. Park Circus Calcutta pra Lorato Nam to tar Irfan Ali na tenuka kiba asile, and it was a solo play. Thik sarita bajise, sarita pasta bajile. Aru tar jitu narrative asile, hey narrative or bhitorot, there was something about, about communities, about being a Muslim in contemporary India and so on. So hey khamor azanor mattu ahi. And this was live. This is very interesting. Keteba theatre at magic hoy. Etu jodiu digital, this was magic. The boy got the first prize. It was serendipity. Amar Assamia Ingraji tata shobdo ase serendipity. Maybe it was just that. Maybe he timed it in such a way that tar dialogue or logot, tar monologue or logot, ei bostuto mili ahi gol. It was very, very interesting. So that I watched about 6 plays, all online. This was during the pandemic. Tar pisat, etia London at West End or kothao koman kom. Then we'll come to. I have time. Super. So, when I first went to London and I wanted to go straight to the Globe or Globe Shakespeare natok korisile moi to samei aru. So, prothombar he khomat natokor ticket to napalu. Olop deri hoi gol. But I went to see a measure for measure performance in Sam Wanamaker Theatre. And I janu je Sam Wanamaker is the person who actually recreated the current Globe in London. Since we are talking about theatre spaces. The Globe was burned down 2 times. I mean, jano etu kher asset in the Globe has it's roofless in the middle, and where the audience is sitting, that is covered by a thatch roof. Kheror ase gote. Aru tate hiati historical drama bilak jetia kore, tetia cannon solai die ba arrow solai die, jui sui lagi jay. And 2 times we know that this theatre has burned down completely. And then Sam Wanamaker actually went and he created the Globe again in its original avatar. Moi goi pelai loge loge, you know, I tar je wall ase, Glober wall ase, Pranjala janibo. Moi olop tate bhonga asile. Moi olop khusuri salu ki ase tat. You know, it was amar je ikora bera hoy, ikora berar ghor bor hoy na nohoy. Ajikali তোমালোকে নাজানিবাই চাগে ই কৰা বেৰা কেটামান মানুহে জানে না এইটো আছে so this is the fun thing about a space that has been recreated exactly with almost the same materials that was there built during Shakespeare's own time. So the space itself is so fascinating. And then I saw this other very important, very interesting bosor July mahot goi sai lilo Minak Theatre boli eta thai ase. It's in Cornwall. Aru Cornwallot eto hoy apnar the sea is a little down there. Khub cliffs ase, mosto ukho cliff ase, aru tar uporot theatre to banai dise. Okay, so your audience is seated janeke etu olop ukho hoi jay, ekkebare bahut ukho hoi jay, and natok hek hoa lage it becomes a little dark, and the tide rises, sea tide rise hoy, and it hits against the theatre. And Twelfth Night is a play where you have a shipwreck. So imagine again, very, very magical kind of space that they have been able to make. But there are 2 riders. The play was disappointing. Because, you know, you don't do Shakespeare the way, you know, you do it now. It was a very, shall we say, touristy kind of performance. It bahut bhal hobo parile heten. But tahati shipwreck or bostu to use kora nai. So that was the limitation. Eto London hobo pare ba Cornwall hobo pare, natok as a natok bhal loga nai. But the space was absolutely beautiful. Tar pisot aru eta beya natok salu.
You missed the text and the performance also in that particular show.
Beg your pardon?
You missed the text in that performance.
No, text to gutte ani dile, performance to ekku innovative bostu nai. Mane space to jitu use koribo parile heten etu nai kora. Tar pisot aru eta beya natok salu. Now I'm talking about the bad plays that one can see, and one has to understand when and what to watch. You know, the longest running play in the history of the Western world is The Mousetrap. Yeah, you're familiar with that. So I said, "Thik ase, I should just I do some." Hey, Bhagavan, 2 ghanta keneke kotaiso, I don't know. It was so bad. It was so bad. Mousetrap can again be redone. Now this is the thing that I will talk about when I'm talking about Orunda's natok.
Mousetrap khon director bujhiye na pale.
একেবাৰে নতুন একোই নাই, যেটো টেক্সট আছে হেয়া আপুনি চালে তো টেক্সটটো মই পঢ়ি ল'ম ন, একো যদি প্ৰডাকশ্যন ভ্যালুৱে নাই, what is the point of it? So there was no interpretation. You know, a director or an actor is supposed to interpret the play You're not just supposed to read the lines. Then you read a novel. Right? So that is the big problem that I found there. But there was another one very interesting play that I saw, which had Ralph Fiennes. Have you seen Harry Potter? A.J. Voldemort ase? Tell. Ralph Fiennes. And he did a solo on the Four Quartets. The Four Quartets is what is it? It's a poem, it's a long poem by T.S. Eliot. You have all heard of T.S. Eliot, you have all heard of The Wasteland. Yeah? This is the last big poem that he wrote. It's one of my favorites. I love poetry too. And when you see Ralph Fiennes, and this was just one person, a small desk on the side, two big walls that rotated. Rotating walls. Okay. And Four Quartets is in 4 parts. Atata quartet, atata quartet. And to hold the audience's attention for 2 hours alone with poetry is not a small thing. Okay. And so he used his body, he used those 2 walls, sat down once in a while, wrote something, again went back to doing poetry. So here you have a dramatization of poetry. I think that, again, it was a rare production that was happening. To Harold Pinter Theatre on West End, jitu moi goi salu. The 2 other very good ones that I will talk about is Jerusalem, Mark Rylance or Natok ase. Again, a whole forest inside the stage and done properly. Aru eta bor eto moi miss korilu about scenography. Sweden or jetia goiso 17th century ami jano jone theater ami porhu ami jano je 17th century is the time when scenography in terms of scene painting ajikali konoe nokore. Painted scenery. Painted scenery was very, very big during the 17th century. Hey humor toledi tana tani kori gutte at a forest ulaya hai. So this was a 17th century castle called Drottningholm Palace in a little bit near Stockholm. Aru tate at a operatic performance sounde. This scenography thing was something that really struck me. It was wonderful. Manue opera gai ase, aru ifale gutte forest the stage has turned into a forest. And then it turns into a palace. And these are all painted sceneries that will come just by pulling.
Dimension to ulai heta.
Ekebare. Khali eta backdrop nohoy, gutte 5-6 side diye ulai hai. So that mechanism is still working. 17th century pra 80 loke preserve kora ase, kaam to hoi ase. Heitu bostu ami hikibo ase etia loke. Amar sob bostu lupto hoi jay. Amar preservation or etia je apuni kaam kori ase theater archive. Hopefully kisuman bostu eitu di ami preserve koribo parim. Kintu these are things that for theater students it's very, very interesting. The scenography and the whole mechanism. One last performance I'll talk about is The Life of Pi. Life of Pi cinema, how many of you have seen it? Yeah, so now imagine what it will be on stage. Baag lage. Yeah? Sea, baag, boat, many animals. Yeah? Moi bhabilu etu ki hobo? Moi boso let me see it. Moi to samei. Bahut paisa lagise. I had to pay a lot of money for that performance, but I went to see. Aru seat to bhagyo bhal olop uporor seat to directly on top of the stage. Palu. So I got a very ringside view. Bhalke dekha pai. So tate mosto bag ulaise de. The bag was 4 people in a bunraku puppet. Wonderful. I have no words. I have photographs. I really made a mistake. I should have brought those photographs here. But Bunraku puppets, 4 people. So, you know, when credits, apnar je playbill diye, playbill sub credits lekha thake to. Credits ot lekha ase Richard Parker. Richard Parker is the name of the bag, right? And Hinghotor naam to ase. So he Richard Parker or head, Richard Parker or piti, Richard Parker or tail. So the credits are 4 different people playing the character of Richard Parker. And of course, everything else was also there. Ship peta bonija, Arcornisna. So you have other puppets, giraffes and bulls and monkeys and orangutans and so on. Everyone in terms of puppets.
Because puppet material, surface or key material.
I think they use very lightweight wood. Wood and fabric. Fabric edi oide malleability to ahe. Aru tan koribo karone khoru patol ase bhanga ute bhanga. So apunar janeke we have joints na ei sobot kapur or etu kat. So you can make it like that, right? So the whole thing worked wonderfully. I mean, manu dekha pao, that is all right. Suspension of disbelief to ase. But the boat, the stage would cut out of a boat to la hai. Hey, eketa boat jetia hospital scene hoy, it turns into a bed. And so on. So these are theatre mechanisms that a record koribo nidie. Hetu to hoy. Amar tat sobe camera ulai thik se photo mare yate. But actually photo to libo napayo aru hioti allow no kore. Ahi pela thiyo hoy dibo nohole. So only time you can take photos is when they are taking a bow. All right, so Life of Pi, Array Bag and Bunraku puppets. Eto puppets are, this is a Japanese form. Jito moi in New York also had gone and seen a few. Ekane ma buji palu je eto Bunraku method to hai yate hiati use kori loise. So now truly this long list might have seemed a little tiresome for all of you, but for me, this was the classroom where I truly learned whatever I know, and I continue to hopefully learn about theatre. The physical manifestations, the embodied coming to lifeness, the singularity of each performance, and the theoretical questions that this imposes in terms of interpretation and meanings. When the dramatic text, which is always incomplete, becomes whole, albeit every time differently. Now, when intertexts between drama and theatre and performance throw up newer resonances, and this is why I found Mousetrap so bad. There's nothing new, no newer resonance. Old thing, they keep on doing it. Poisa pai, it's a tourist attraction. Throw up newer resonances and renders unstable all manner of meaning that we might read into the written texts. And as one of my favorite theoreticians of the theatre, Peggy Phelan, has said, you know, the minute you start recording a theatrical moment, it becomes non-theatrical. Because the whole idea, what Dada also just pointed out, digital theatre hobo nware boli koise. Yeah, because the more act of recording brings in fixity, whereas the theatrical moment is always in flux. It is always fluid. It is open to change. It is very dangerous in terms of all of you might stumble, you might fall, you might sneeze, and your entire performance will change. And that, for Peggy Phelan, is what she will call the theatrical moment, the liveness and immediacy of theatre, so that theatre can be referred to as theatre. That is the intrinsic core element of what it means to do theatre. So the minute we record or even recall, so this whole exercise of me remembering theatre and talking about it is also something that is, that what I saw, I can never recreate it. What I'm saying is my perception of that particular theatre moment. So these are theoretical problems that anyone who's reading theatre will stumble upon. And so, while the stage page distinctions have been deliberated over ad nauseum, it will still be worth mentioning that every play that I watched over these decades had something completely singular about it. Now, moving back home to focus on the plays that I have read and the productions that I have watched, but because the same director and the same author. Kintu natok bur dated ase. Okay, so you have, say, a play like Purukh, very old play, in 1960s or like you said. So Arun Sarma, at the end of Abinash Sarma's Purukh, said he was very moved. Production to শেষ হৈছে, performance শেষ হৈছে. Arun Dai কয় যে মই এতিয়া একো ক'ব নেলাগে, যেটো নাটক হ'ল যিখিনি ক'ব লগা আছিলে নাটকেৰে অবিনাশ দাই কৈ দিছে. So that is a specific, what happens, that a performance that spoke for itself, and it is besides the point that he happened to be the author. Because, this is another thing about theatre. Theatre can never have a single author. We know that, right? No theatre can have one author. Because your director will be another author, your interpreter, the viewer will be another author, the actor is going to be another author, the setting person is going to be a part author. So you have multiple voices and a polyphonic space that constitutes a theatrical performance text, the mise en scene that we see. So, about Purush again, how could a play not of immediate contextual resonance in 2012 about the rise and fall of a circus company? Anyone of you, have you seen circus? Circus দেখিছা? বাঘ ভালু আজিকালি banned হৈ গৈছে নহয়, আজিকালি তো you people, I'm sure you won't even think it's going to ever happen. Circuses are not there anymore. In Europe there is this big trapeze acrobat kind of thing that is called Cirque du Soleil. But that is not really animals and all. But Purukh is set in a circus which has bugs and other things, Not the kind of bug we are talking about in Life of Pi, but this is about caged animals and the circus ring. So it's about the rise and falls of a circus company. How can it even ring true in an age that has altogether erased the very existence of circuses that use live animals on stage? But any great literary text, and again the literary and the performative intertext is what I'm looking at, any great literary text does not really date if the performative focus is right. Sarma's plays are not the kind that you can pigeonhole as realist. You are all reading something by Arun Sarma, I'm sure. Yeah? What are you reading? Ahar. I'm going to talk about Ahar. So what I'm saying is that, he cannot be termed just a realist or a symbolist or someone who does absurd drama. Ahar to absurd buli koa hoy, I beg to differ all the time about that. But they all invoke a kind of existential angst. Existentialism je European at a philosophical space ase, eitu poster pra olop draw kore. It seems to be a hallmark of.
Arun Dai nijeও কোৱা নাই total absurd.
No.
Some reflection is there.
No, of course, he's borrowed. Opekha.
But it's a beautiful, composed
Of course,
thing.
absolutely. I'm going to say that. Yeah. So this is about the rise and fall of Rupali circus, but about the undefinables that shape the human psyche and ultimately the loneliness of the protagonists, who live in a world that is fragmented and refuses to become whole. The title defines the nature of the conflicts that is explored, which is sensitive, artistic, literature-loving hero pitted against a dynamic and strong-willed heroine, the ring mistress. And so the dramatic difference between the characters is key to a successful production. Shukanto and Hiramani exist in completely different worlds, and neither can understand the other. There is a gradual unraveling. The animals will die, the circus will become bankrupt. Shukanto pogola hoi jabo. But for all her domineering dynamism, Hiramani also will be left completely helpless and hapless at the end. The dialogue, again, literature, because it's a very literary language. We know that Orunda's language is extremely literary. And hetu bostu ajikali hoyto okoman problem create hoy. Given the kind of audience that we have, because we are talking also of spectatorship. I have sat through, I think, Aharer production eta hoi ase. Aru mor logot 5-6 jon bohi ase Ohomia নাটক চাব আহিছে অসমীয়া মানুহ কিন্তু নাটক গোটেইখিনি হৈ যোৱাৰ পাছত মই ভাষাটো বুজি নাপাওঁ right so it's this literary language. You can say the same thing about Shakespeare, actually. You can say the same thing about Shakespeare, but if you understand the language, then you have magic. And I think that is true of Orunda too. So the dialogue is brilliant and poetic and lyrical, and all the time, however, keeping pace with the evolving narrative of the play. And the director focused upon that. Now the play will begin with 2 jokers, clowns, in full costume in a set that is deliberately using the paraphernalia of the circus. Ring as a semiotic reminder of the locale. The trapeze, ropes, net, cage of the lion, the curtains and everything else. So the ring is actually brought in. So the circus becomes, in this production, a very important semiotic component, which will, you're talking about Shukanto, who is inside a cage. Now that's an existential cage, really. But it is manifest in the production by the physicalization or embodiment, if you like to call it that, of the cage. So you can see it, and he goes and locks himself up in that cage, and there you have the imprint of the sign, and the metaphor is emphasized. So then the jokers begin as part of the bric-a-brac. One of them will soon assume roles of joker, narrator, character embedded within the narrative that will unfold rapidly, and the tempo will be maintained throughout the performance with a tight leash, khub tight production hoisile. And the grand visual of the circus will only serve symbolic purposes. So that is why you have to have all these things on stage. What I didn't like about the production was the actual lion. It had a mask. A person was wearing a lion's mask, and there were neon pink lights on him. And it was completely, I thought, unnecessary. It had a realistic bostur pura majote ghopoke eta, it is, you're not doing Life of Pi. They are not saying, they are showing the legs of the people and so on and so forth. But this is a realistic kind of symbolistic thing. So even just a projection of the lion might have worked. Right? But they physicalized it, and I thought that was not necessary. But other things was impeccable. But a play like Purush does not offer unproblematic options when it comes to stagecraft. If it is taken as a realist play with its brilliant dialogues, it is possible to arrive at a certain kind of interpretation. But this would be simplistic. Now, it is the imperative that the staging of such plays make use of the layers that resonate and create the polyphony that touch upon nuances that would otherwise be lost. Now this has to come through the actor's body, the stage visualization, and the use of signs that throw up the various subtexts, the soundtrack, music, and even interaction with the audience. The second play is 2013, Napoleon and Desiree. মই বিৰাট ভয় খাইছিলোঁ এইটো নাটক কিয়নো কৰে এতিয়া this is a play set in during the post-French Revolution. It's a period piece. It is in Assamese. You're wearing European gowns and bouffant hairstyle and everything. অসমীয়াত কথা বস্তুটো কেনেকৈ খাপ খাব কেনেকৈ মিলিব মই বিৰাট ভয়তে আছিলোঁ যে এটা কি হ'ব এইটো নাটকটো কৰিব বুলি কৈছে কৰিম so the answer was actually very simple, and I think Abinash showed that. He had just two set to basic kora nai ko. Duta column use korise, pispine eta ronga border. Okay, so you had white marble effect and a red. The contrast, it works immediately. And then you had costumes on ekkebare kuera nai. They did very good research. They used authentic post-French Revolution, very ornate costumes. And in fact, I will never forget Birinai korisile Josephina's role too. Tai jetia ulai ahe na, she's the queen who Napoleon has married. And it was a spectacle. So that, I thought, was a very, very interesting thing to do. So there's Desiree, Julie, mother, perfect costume, makeup, hairstyles, everything. So, prothomate okoman Ohomia konte disconcerting in the beginning. But once you get into the rhythm of the intense love affairs and the politics and the court intrigues and controversies, you cease to bother about the linguistic medium. I said that when we watch Macbeth in Manipuri, we still understand the play. And I think the same thing sort of applies here. You're watching Napoleon and France in Assamese, and it still works. I think is a great achievement. It's not easy to do. You're not devising, you're doing it realistically. So very difficult. So, but then how does one relate to Napoleon's story in the 21st century in Assam? In post-colonial India, khub dur, right? So the production will play out French history, the Napoleonic Wars, his love for many women, the tragedies, and the impressive mise-en-scene that I think solved the problems for Abinash, and in a language that was accessible to a very rapt audience, because the audience is already inside the trap. Spectacles are always a trap. Or not? You have a big spectacle, you are already in. So once you are in, now I can manipulate you. Now please remember, we have performances in all forms everywhere in the world, not just in the theatre. So once I give you a spectacle, I have you in my power, right? So now I'm able to throw things at you. So here you have that in Napoleon. So power, politics, and love are themes that never cease to generate new meanings with every performance across cultures. 2018, Ahar, the play that many of you have read. So once you enter into the theatre in this production of 2018 by Abinash Sarma, one is faced with just a backdrop of arches of Lord Northbrook Gate, Hukleshwar যেটো আছে আৰু এটা boga kapur tate hanging over there, and there is a ring immediately underneath from a ring, and it is stretched to give tate perspective to already ahigol. Now I think one of our great stage designers in Assam, contemporary Assam, is Abinash Sarma. I think that is his forte. He does wonderful work with the stage. So, ekunai, but you still have a perspective on stage. The depth has been created. And then you have 4 men. One is a poet, one is industrialist, one is a revolutionary, and another one is a debauch. Modapi. And they sit there with their hats on and faces in the dark under the soft red spotlights. Then the woman is draped in white and she emerges and she begins to speak. And Arun Sarma's modernist play, I'm calling it modernist rather than call it absurdist, because modernism actually includes the absurd. This is a fascinating play to watch because it recalls some of the greatest Western plays, such as even the gravedigger scene from Hamlet of Shakespeare. The other very obvious influences are Beckett's Waiting for Godot and even Eugene Ionesco's Amédée. I don't know if you are familiar with that play, but Amédée is a wonderful play. Every time I read it, I find that this is so powerful in terms of semiotics, where a dead body keeps growing and growing and growing. The dead body will come into the stage from the other room, and the hand, the finger, and everything will keep growing. It's not the dead body that is growing, it's your guilt, really, that is being manifested. So that, of course, is an absurd play. So you have that kind of thing here in terms of the woman figure, dressed in white right in the beginning. And as they wait to bury the body of the woman, they talk to themselves, they talk to each other, and the terrible truths, all involving a different woman, emerge. This woman is the face of the men's own conflicted existence, their unnameable fears and guilt, their selfhood, and their very own sense of being. And she must be buried if they are to exorcise themselves. So the woman, in that sense, is real, but she is a symbol. She is someone who needs to be buried. Ahar has always been referred to as an absurd play, and the influences and intertexts are overt and obvious, especially when the four men parade around the stage declaiming Opekha, Opekha, Opekha. But this is not, according to me, an absurd play, absurdist play. Absurd elements ase, kintu gute absurd play kobole gaya, I think noari. Karan ki ase, tate tangible storyline ase. Aru absurd play storyline nathake. That is one of the big things about absurd drama. That story nathake. You are familiar with Waiting for Godot? Two people wait for Godot. They do all sorts of things, because what is waiting? What do you do when you wait for a bus?
Uncertain.
It's uncertain, but waiting is an absence. Khalipan eta ase, no? It's you're waiting for a bus, but you are looking at the pan dukan, you are eating a pan, and you are you're talking to your friend, and I ask you, what are you doing? I'm waiting for the bus. But you're not. You're doing all these other things. Right? So waiting is an absence, but the world does not allow absence, no? Vacuum to thakibo nware. Any scientist will tell you that. A vacuum cannot exist. So in that absence, all sorts of other things will come in. So absurd plays, in that sense, will not have a proper storyline. Okay? It's just something there, and it can overlap. The story will tell itself twice. So this Vladimir and Estragon are on stage, they will wait. They're asking, what are the people ask them, what are you doing? Okay, we are waiting for Godot. And then Godot doesn't come. So then they go back, and the second act begins, and the same thing happens again. Yeah. And Godot doesn't come. At the end again, the boy comes and says, "No, Godot will not be able to come today." So that is an absurd play. And here, it's not like that, because every character has a story, a backstory eta ase. Tar action or jito, why does he act or behave the way that character behaves is implicit in the story. They are all guilty people, but that storyline is there. So that is one of the reasons why I'm saying it's not an absurd play. So it has tangible storylines and episodes that are pregnant with meaning, unlike the nothingness that an absurd play is wont to explore. In Abinash Sarma's interpretation, the play hangs between the real and the surreal, and the interior and exterior landscapes will collide and result in devastation that will play off one story against the other. And the human being must deal with the pain of living in an unforgiving universe. What is interesting is that the playwright chooses to demarcate, now this is the literary part of it, duta bhag kore dise. Why one woman and 4 men? So actually that is the pointer, because that the woman is not really real. She's a symbol of their own guilt in that sense. So experimental plays, and this is an experimental play, actually work or not depending on designing of the production. And Ahar, the one that I have seen, just worked very, very beautifully. The last scene was particularly well executed, and the production made use of the olfactory. Etu bor bostu bor interesting pao moi nazani theatre practitioners e ki bhabe etu kotha gundho ami বিশেষকৈ use কৰা নাযায় production বিলাকত, কিন্তু গোন্ধ has a memory na. All smells have a memory, don't they? This is what he did in this play. He used dhoop, and you're already talking about a woman who is dead. They want to dig her up and steal the body from the morgue and bury her or something. And dhoop জ্বলাই থৈ দিছে. So the stage-ত এটো বহুত dhoop use কৰা হৈছিলে. More এতিয়ালৈকে মনত আছে, মোৰ an aunt of mine had died. মানুহ ঢুকালে আমি ধূপ জ্বলাওঁৱে। এই পাৰ্টিকুলাৰ ধূপৰ গোন্ধটো মই এতিয়াও পালে মোৰ একেবাৰে I remember my aunt. So smell has a memory, and I'm always thinking, why do theatre practitioners not use smell? বহুত কম use হয়। We are using all our 5 senses. Ketiba tachu hoy.
We use a ugly, that repulsive, that smell, that dirt smell in lower depth. Maximum work is lower depth.
Use korise. Gundho to mane ekebare
dorhok entry koriye ki beya bolot ami khumaisu. We made it like that. Lala they used become
in fact scientifically also your nasal olfactory glands stop working after a while. Gundho to brain block kori diye. So I would like to talk about apnar logot pohem edin etu kotha kudim, because I'm always thinking about olfactory and staging. Not much is always used. Etu production not kintu ei dhoop to use korisile. And the olfactory actually.
And it is in the text also. It is there. Hospital jalai de.
Etut ase. Aru I think he used it in the middle of the stage also. So in the towards the audience also. So that smoke and the smell both comes across beautifully. The last play that I will talk about, I've taken up a lot of time, I know. I think we've crossed time, Subrat. I think I can just stop here actually. I'll just end with a couple of 3 things. There was Ognigor, but I will talk about it later someday, somewhere. So as theatres across the world become edgier and more experimental, depending on their contexts, it is important for theatre scholars and researchers to keep visiting the theatres to learn of these. Please, theatres, haba. Okay, to the students, this is to the students and your friends and your families. Please take people to see theatre. Okay, moi to student bilagok free tickets di pareshan keteba hetu na jay. Yeah, but theatre sabo lage. It is important for theatre scholars and researchers to visit the theatres to learn of this. it is important for the directors to work with dramaturges. Okkoman dramaturge use koratu khub kom hoy in India. That a person who will keep talking about interpretations, etc., 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 that interface between the production and the text, the dramaturge, who will work with the director. And perhaps most importantly, one must not cease to create new material out of the old. If anything, it actually helps in renewing the audience's interest in theatre history and the theatrical text that is being adapted. So adaptations are khub apotti moi janu amar to mane etu news ot khoborot ahiye thake je kisuman bostu notunke kora hoise kiba hoise. There should always be a disclaimer je etu mur natok, it is not somebody else's natok. Okay, so that if one keeps that perspective in view, always reinterpretation gives new life to the play. And that I think is there, because after all, complacency can kill the magic in the theatre. As Antonin Artaud once said, and I love these lines, we are not free, and the sky can always fall on our heads. And the theatre has been created to teach us that, first of all. We are not free. Thank you.
অশেষ ধন্যবাদ জ্ঞাপন কৰিলোঁ আমাৰ আজিৰ উদ্বোধনী অনুষ্ঠান ইমানতে অন্ত পৰিছে